Welcome to the module SU003 of Orocon's upskill modular training program devoted to Revit and BIM. This module is titled Schedules for Initial Quantity Takeoff and is brought to you on behalf of Orocon by A2K Technologies. We will be using the purchase materials supplied by Orocon and A2K Technologies. Classroom notes and handouts are available for note-taking through the Exemplar portal. Throughout the training today, we will be covering the following topics: quantities from the architect model schematic, quantities from the architect model preliminary, quantities from structural model detail, quantities using BIMlink, quantities using Navisworks quantification workbook, quantities using Costex including model like you are building it, consistency is king, using the right tool for the right element, communication. Quantities from the architect model schematic. First of all, open the following file: project schematic.rvt. Opening a default 3D view. If visually nothing is showing, under visual graphic override, turning on mass. Here you can now see an architectural preliminary drawing created from masses. Each of these floor masses have the ability to calculate volume and area. To create a quick schedule from this, right-clicking on Schedule Quantities, New Schedule Quantities. Scrolling down to Mass Floor, adding the following parameters: level, floor area, floor volume. Just tiling our view. As you can see, there's a certain floor area for each level and a volume. Now this has no real structural information. To convert this mass floor into structural information, we need to convert to an actual structural floor. Just closing down our schedule, having our 3D view, default view open. Under the Massing and Site tab, across to Model by Face and Floor, selecting multiple floors and create floor. And now in visual graphic overrides, turning off our mass just to be left with floors. Picking one of the floors currently has a certain size, changing all these floors to an actual structural floor, filtering just the floors. In this instance we'll be using floor number 2, which is the default 300 thick floor. Also in turn my selected, ensuring structural has been ticked. Creating a new schedule and quantities. In this case here it's a floor schedule and quantities. Scrolling down and adding level, area and volume, and comparing the schedules together. Opening the mass floor schedule and the floor schedule together to be able to get a comparison. So the areas are the same and obviously the volumes are now different because the structural floor schedule is actually using the 300 thickness. Now we have also, besides volumes, now that we have also converted this to a structural floor, it now allows us the ability to be able to use analytical. Under visual graphics and turning off the model, we are now left with analytical. And in turn, as per previous training, applying a hosted area load for future designs. And that concludes quantifications from the architectural model at a schematic stage. Quantities from the architect model preliminary. Start a new project using your Office template. Once the template has been opened, open the default 3D view. Now we wish to link in under the Insert tab, Link Revit, and we'd like to link in the Architectural RAC Advanced Sample Project at positioning origin to origin. Ensuring discipline is set to coordination. We are going to use this architectural information to quickly copy, monitor, or copy across some floors, walls, columns for our quantities. Under the Collaborate tab, copy monitor, selecting link, selecting the architectural model. Go through the options tab for columns, walls, floors as required. Then copy, multiple for tick. Now we were just working on one portion of the building just to save time in this demonstration. Just a crossing window over one corner of the building. Once selected, just checking your filters that some elements have been selected, and then finish. And then going to the final finish. If we now unload this architectural drawing, we go up to now Manage tab, Manage Links, selecting the architectural drawing and unload. We should be now left with just some structural information. We will now create a new material takeoff schedule with the information that we have copied across. Browser left hand side, right click on Schedule Quantities and New Material Takeoff. Using multi-category, this will allow us to select more than one category. The available fields we'd like to put in would be material volume, material area, level, family and type. As you can see, we now have columns, we have walls, we have floors. Then just go through your sorting and grouping. We'll be doing sorting and grouping by family and type. And we'd also like to have the grand totals adding up. For this to occur, under Formatting tab, selecting volume and area, and ensure Calculate Totals has been selected. Back under Sorting and Grouping, as a footer, just ensure there's a blank line just for ease of visualization. As you can see, all the columns, we've got a volume, we've got an area, all the walls are volume and area, and the ground floor and volume and area. Obviously going through, changing each relative floor to suit your project will, as required, will obviously increase the accuracy of your volumes. Now we have a base schedule set up. We're also going to add some additional information, which is costs. So first of all, let's go and duplicate our schedule. this multi-category material takeoff cost. Going now to our fields area, we want to add the field cost. As you can see, it's currently is a blank cell. We also want to add a new calculated cell, which will be material cost, because this will be cost per unit. For example, the cost per unit or per cubic meter for the columns, this might be, as an example, $5.50. And yes. So now if we go back to fields and go to calculate value, we'll do this cost per column, and we'll be using volume, and we'll be using volume times, so star for times, and OK, and OK. So this is now calculating $5.50 times 0.49. Now obviously, seeing cubic meters, we can now drop this information out under the Format tab, selecting cost per column, at the same time calculate totals, but going to field format, unticking the use project settings and changing that to be none. And there's our cost. So changing any of these values, if this should have been $50, $155.50 per cubic meter, then all of a sudden we're starting to get some information, actual cost per cubic meter. Having to create this information for each project can become quite tedious and slow. If we open our default 3D view, and in this case here we're going to use some pre-made schedules. So to use this, under the Insert tab, Insert from File, Insert Views from File, selecting Schedules Standards.rvt, this will open up some pre-made schedules. So for this example, let's select the following schedule: Structural Column Material Takeoff Costs. And as you can see, this has already been pre-made, which is only using columns. A cost has been applied, so this could be pre-set up in your Office standards, and they're very quickly calculating total values. Just to get columns, this is all controlled through the filtering process. Or in turn, it could be actually just a new schedule and actually only using structural columns. And as you can see, these results match the previous setup. 1631.12, 1631.12. That concludes quantities from architectural model prelim. Quantities from the structural model detail. Open the following structural model: Project QTO, and detach this from Central. Preserve worksets. Once open default 3D view. The current color coding is indicating different material types. As you can see, selecting a member, it's indicating a steel beam, steel columns, and the greys is the concrete, and the pile foundations, currently using steel piles. We want to now load in some pre-made schedules. So under the Insert tab, Insert from File, Views from File, selecting Schedule Standards RVT. In this case here, check all except for the structural column material takeoff, and selecting OK and OK. Scrolling down to our schedules, for example, if we now go down to material takeoff, we can start seeing some information coming through automatically. So having pre-made schedules has saved us a lot of time. Steelwork, etc. This is an example using steel weights, so we can work out tonnage of steel. And that concludes quantities from structural model detailing. Quantities using BIMlink. Using the same project, open BIMlink, add-ins, BIMlink. Load in a pre-made link. Load link, selecting multi-category, and open. Double clicking the multi-category link just to see what parameters are being used. This will be using volume, family type, and level name. And export this out to Excel. Once exported, open up the Excel file. In Excel, ensure sorting and filter has been used. This will help you sort out element by element base. For example, if working on the floors, and now just shows the floors. Then using standard Excel commands, first one is using the sum method for the volume, and to count how many actual floors inside the project, using a formula called COUNTIF. COUNTIF between a range of C2 to C911, using the common word floor, is indicating that there are 6 of. Compare these results to Revit, which then match. If going down to floor material, 6 of, and that concludes quantities using BIMlink. Quantities using Navisworks quantification workbook. With Navisworks open, Home tab, Append, and append the following file: RST Advanced Sample Project.nwc. Once in Revit, just looking at the model, it just matches your Revit model. First of all, just visually making the colours a bit different. Under the Viewport tab, going across to the mode and changing to be shaded. We now want to open up the quantification workbook, an item to be able to use Navisworks for quantities. Under the View tab, across to Windows, we want to open up quantification workbook and also the item catalogue. Down the quantification workbook, we want to go to project setup. In this case here, these are pre-made catalogues that you can set up to your standards. For our example, we'll be using none and ensuring metric has been used. Change units as required. First of all, we're going to create a new group up under the item catalogue. Selecting new group. This new group will be called piles. Selecting piles, we also want to create a new item, so this is like a subcategory. So this one here, we will call this 2 pile cap. We now need to create a series of selection sets, or to be able to create or select the elements to apply to 2 pile cap. Once selecting one of the pile caps, in this case here, if I go same name, as you can see, it's now selected all the same name for the 2 pile caps. Once selected, save selection. This selection here. Pile cap. So at any stage under the Sets tab, we can select this for quick selections. With these now selected, just inside the viewing window, right click, down to quantification, we can now take off to the 2 pile cap. As you can see now, there are 48 pile caps now added to the selection. So in the quantification workbook, it's listing each individual pile. It's picking up our model lengths, our widths, our thicknesses, all in preparation ready for quantities. Alternative method to updating a quantification workbook, for example, going back up to item catalogue, create a new item. This one will be the 4 pile cap. And at this point here, as we can see, a different colour. With the 4 pile cap, back in your viewing window, if selecting one of the 4 pile caps, picking and dragging over the top, as you can see, has automatically updated the workbook. Colour coding is very important, just to make it easier to see where you're at. Once you've started populating your workbook, at any stage, for example selecting piles, you can hide your takeoff, which hides the elements, and then slowly go around to every other element, or even show just to see which ones have been placed inside the workbook. Other methods for quantities, you can actually do measuring of elements. Under the Review tab, under Measure, Selecting the measuring options, you're opening up the measuring tools dialog box. For example, we may select the measuring of the area. In this case here, we'll measure just an area of this wall. Which gives us 98 meters square. Just selecting this value and right click and copy for future use. Obviously, in addition, besides area for this sample, we're just going to measure some lengths to use for later use. I select, say, two opposite corners and highlighting the 14.39 and copy. Down in the quantification workbook, right clicking, new virtual takeoff, and down under model length at any stage, right click and paste. So repeating this process again is just a manual way to create your quantities. Changing the item, now once you have set up your workbook, at any stage you can actually export these results. Across to the right we have an export option. Exporting quantities to Excel. In this case here, we'll just use new quantity report. Open up the file after exporting. With tabs created and all data, you can start to see the results of what's coming out. This now gives you full flexibility to calculate any information as required. And that concludes quantities using Navisworks quantification workbook. Quantities using Costex, including model like you are building. Consistency is king, using the right tool for the right element, communication. Costex is a third-party program that will link in the Revit files directly through DWF and DWFX. Costex is made by Exactall. As most QS quantity surveyors are now using this, it now is becoming the complete 3D BIM and 2D estimating solution. Referring back to White Frog module 01 and understanding the level of detail is very important when modelling inside Revit. For example, model like you are building it. Opening the file, Costex sample used. Opening the O2 floor plan. There's a section near grid 10. Opening this section, go to view. As you can see, the floor at the moment extends in to the wall, but the wall is continuous. Either the wall would need to stop and start where the floor is, with another wall below, or the floor itself and its boundary would need to come back to the inside. This is now correct. So modelling like you are building it is very important. Being consistent on a project is important not just for the initial user but also for the end users. For example, this column here is called concrete round column 450, whereas this column here is called M underscore concrete round column 450. Exactly the same type, or is meant to be the same type, but this will now create problems inside Costex. And it's the same as if you're doing a schedule inside Revit. For example, new schedule and quantities, structural column, I had a count, family and type, changing the sorting and grouping by family and type, grand totals, as you can see now. So we're starting to get a difference between the two. So rather than 189, there's 188 plus 1. Using the right tools for the right elements, i.e. not mixing components when they're not meant to be used. If we open a default 3D view, if we change to be shaded, just spinning our model around, whereas these piles obviously being blue in colour, but we've also got some other piles being red. So this pile set here is using concrete cast in situ place, whereas this one is using a different material, which is cast in situ concrete 35 MPa. Again, this will create inconsistencies inside Costex. Besides materials, we always try to avoid mixing the elements. These foundations are actually being drawn as a column, whereas these have actually been modelled as foundations. So again, if I was creating now a foundation schedule, count, family and type, sorting by family and type, grand totals, I would be now missing those red piles. And finally, with Costex, for this to work very well is communication. A good example is selecting some of the current elements. At the beginning of the job and throughout the job, a QS or quantity surveyor will tell you what he may need to be filled out. For example, there might be a building zone to be filled out. So this may be Zone A. Having this information up front will save time at the end. Not filling our elements out everywhere. So ignoring these all of a sudden creates inconsistencies. And that concludes quantities using Costex.
And it's about to import the model into it. So this is just the blank software. What it has is our intelligence linked to it. So it's got templates and current prices, so the real prices attached to it. Imported the model in, and this is a view. So at the moment we're looking at the model space, we're looking at the view of it. Later we'll turn to what the estimate is. Here we're looking at the precast panels, and we can get information about those precast panels. And from it we can call up the precise properties of those precast panels. So we can look at what the perimeter of it is, what the area is, what the cubic meters are. When we're negotiating with a builder, there's a high degree of certainty, and it's the same with subcontractors in explaining and being able to rely on quantity. Start to bring prices back to quantities rather than gut feel of what a bathroom might be worth. And it starts to drive costs in the way that you want them to move. The next thing is you'll start to see down the bottom left-hand side of the screen information being imported. So we've not measured anything. The same codes are coming into the model in terms of the elemental codes. We're now getting the quantity of the precast panels, which is 2,186 square metres. The next phase is we bring in our template. So we bring in a template and we start linking it to costs. And what we get is a first cut of the design like that. So we get an estimate in moments. The shift is, this is just a first cut, so it's now what you do with that information. This is work that we've done collaborating with Archifield. So what we've done is provided codes and placed those codes within Archifield's model. When that model comes to our office, our price list knows what it is, and it's able to link everything together. The technology is one thing, but it's the intelligence and the wisdom that goes together with it. It's how it's linked together that makes it work. And while I think 3D modelling is the way of the future, and it's a must on all projects, you need to work with people that know what they're doing. Because it's not the technology here, it's how you use it that's important.
And that concludes Module SU003, Schedules for Initial Quantity Takeoff.